Grandma, I heard Dad and Mom saying they'll take all your money after Christmas dinner, whispered my 9-year-old granddaughter. I ate in silence and said nothing. The next morning, their lawyer received a phone call nobody expected. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. Grandma, I heard Daddy and Mommy saying they're going to take all your money after dinner. My 9-year-old granddaughter Sophie whispered to me as we sat at the beautifully decorated Christmas table. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my fork freeze halfway to my mouth, the piece of ham suddenly tasting like cardboard. Sophie's innocent blue eyes looked up at me with the pure honesty that only children possess, completely unaware that she had just shattered my world. I forced myself to swallow, my throat suddenly dry as sandpaper. What did you say, sweetheart? I asked, though I had heard every devastating word perfectly. Sophie glanced around the dining room, making sure her parents weren't listening. Helen, my 42-year-old daughter, was busy serving more wine to her husband Richard, both of them laughing about something. They looked so normal, so loving. The perfect family I thought I had raised. They were in their bedroom this morning, Sophie continued in that innocent whisper. Daddy was on the phone with someone about papers, and Mommy said you have too much money for an old lady and that you don't need it anymore. My heart pounded so hard I was certain everyone at the table could hear it. I looked across at Helen, who caught my gaze and smiled that warm, loving smile I had cherished for decades. The same smile she had given me when I sold my dream house to pay for her college education. The same smile she wore when I worked double shifts at the diner until I was 60 to help with her wedding expenses. Grandma? Are you okay? Sophie's small hand touched mine, and I realized I had been staring. I'm fine, darling, I managed, forcing my own smile. Just thinking about how lucky I am to have such a smart granddaughter. But I wasn't fine. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped beating. Helen, my only child, the daughter I had sacrificed everything for. She was planning to steal from me. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I watched Helen serve dessert, complimenting my cooking, asking about my health with what seemed like genuine concern. Richard talked about his job at the insurance company, sharing stories that made Sophie giggle. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but now I knew better. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the family photos that covered every surface. Helen as a baby, Helen's first day of school, Helen's graduation, Helen's wedding. Every milestone documented, every memory preserved. I had been so proud of the woman she had become, or thought she had become. I forced myself to remember the signs I had ignored. The way Helen always had a financial crisis whenever she visited. The expensive clothes and jewelry she wore while claiming to be struggling. The way she had pushed me to sell my car last year, saying I was too old to drive, then suggesting I give her the money since I wouldn't need it. My mind drifted back to 5 years ago when Helen first started asking about my will. She had been so casual about it, bringing it up during a Sunday dinner. Mom, you really should update your will, she had said while clearing dishes. Make sure everything is organized for when. Well, I had laughed it off then. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, Helen. But she persisted. Over the months she brought it up repeatedly, always with concern for my well-being, always framed as being responsible. She even offered to take me to her lawyer friend to make the process easier. Now I realized it hadn't been concern. It had been calculation. The phone rang, startling me from my dark thoughts. It was Helen. Mom, I just wanted to thank you again for that wonderful dinner. Her voice was warm, loving. Sophie had such a great time. She's a special little girl, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Listen, Mom, I've been thinking. Richard and I would love to help you with your finances. Make sure all your bills are being paid properly. Help you organize your investments. At your age, it can be overwhelming to manage everything alone. There it was. The trap being set right before my eyes. That's very thoughtful, dear, but I'm managing just fine. I know you are, Mom, but wouldn't it be nice to not have to worry about all those details? We could set up a simple system where we handle everything for you, just to make life easier. My hands trembled as I held the phone. This was how it started. First, they would gain access to my accounts to help. Then they would gradually take control. And eventually, I would be left with nothing, Probably stuck in some cheap nursing home while they enjoyed the money I had worked my entire life to save. I'll think about it, Helen. Great. I'll call you tomorrow and we can discuss the details. After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of my living room, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The silence was deafening. This was the daughter I had raised, fed, clothed, educated. The daughter I had worked myself to exhaustion for. The daughter who had promised to take care of me in my old age. And she was planning to rob me blind. I thought about my late husband, George. He had warned me about spoiling Helen, about always giving in to her demands. "You're creating a monster, Marilyn," he used to say. "Children need to learn that love doesn't come with a price tag." But I had wanted to give Helen everything I never had growing up. I wanted her to feel secure, loved, provided for. Instead, I had taught her that I was her personal bank account. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the betrayal, the lies, the manipulation disguised as love and concern. How long had she been planning this? How many of our conversations had been calculated moves in her scheme? I looked at the photo on my side table, the one of Helen holding baby Sophie. I had been so happy that day, so proud to be a grandmother. Now I wondered if even that joy had been tainted by Helen's greed. Sophie's innocent words echoed in my mind. "They're going to take all your money after dinner." Well, Helen had always been clever, but she had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated her old mother. And tomorrow I would start showing her just how big a mistake that was. The next morning brought a phone call that confirmed my worst fears. I was in my kitchen, making coffee with hands that still trembled from yesterday's revelation, when the phone rang at 8:30 sharp. "Mrs. Patterson? This is Martin Hendricks from Hendricks & Associates law firm. Your daughter Helen asked me to call you regarding some important family matters." My blood ran cold, so it was already starting. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hendricks, but I didn't ask for any legal consultation." "Oh, I understand your confusion, ma'am. Helen is concerned about your well-being and has asked us to review your current legal situation. She mentioned you've been having some memory issues lately, and she wants to make sure you're protected." Memory issues. The lie was already being planted. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I don't have any memory issues, and I haven't authorized any legal review." There was a pause. "Ma'am, with respect, your daughter is quite concerned. Perhaps we could schedule a simple consultation? Just to put everyone's mind at ease." I hung up without another word, my heart pounding. Helen wasn't wasting any time. She was already building her case, already creating the narrative that would justify taking control of my life. 20 minutes later, Helen called. "Mom, I hope you don't mind, but I asked a lawyer friend to reach out to you. Martin Hendricks, he's wonderful, very caring with older clients." "Helen, I told you I don't need legal help." "Mom, please don't be stubborn. At your age, it's just smart to have proper legal protection in place. What if something happened to you? What if you had an accident or got confused about your finances?" The word confused hit me like a slap. She was already planting seeds, making it seem like I was becoming incompetent. "I'm perfectly fine, Helen. I know you think you are, sweetie. But sometimes we don't notice when our minds start to slip a little. It's completely normal at 74. 74. I was 64 and Helen knew it. But anyone listening to this conversation would hear a concerned daughter worried about her aging, confused mother. "Helen, I'm 64 years old." "Right, of course. See, these little mix-ups happen to all of us. That's exactly why we need to get your affairs in order now, while you're still mostly yourself." Mostly myself. The phrase made my skin crawl. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and forced myself to think clearly. Helen was moving fast, which meant she was desperate. That desperation could be her weakness, but I needed to be smarter than she was. I spent the morning calling my bank, my investment advisor, and my insurance company. Everything was still in my name only, but I could see how easily that could change if Helen managed to get legal control. At noon, Helen showed up at my door unannounced, carrying a bag of groceries and wearing that concerned daughter expression I was beginning to recognize as pure manipulation. "Hi, Mom. I brought you some things from the store. I know how hard it is for you to get out these days." It wasn't hard for me to get out. I drove myself everywhere and maintained an active social life. But Helen was creating a story, and every piece of evidence supported her narrative. She bustled into my kitchen, putting away groceries I hadn't asked for while chattering about my needs. "I got you those easy open cans of soup. I know arthritis makes regular cans difficult. And I picked up some of those nutrition shakes for seniors. You're looking a little thin, Mom." I watched her rearrange my perfectly organized pantry, taking over my space while pretending to help. "Helen, I can take care of my own groceries." "Of course you can, Mom. I just worry about you driving. Your reflexes aren't what they used to be, and the roads are so dangerous these days." She was systematic. I had to give her credit. Every comment was designed to make me seem frail, confused, incapable. "Richard and I have been talking," she continued while folding my dish towels in a different way than I preferred. "We think it would be wonderful if you came to stay with us for a while. Just until we can get some help arranged for you here." "Help? What kind of help?" "Well, maybe someone to come in a few times a week. Help with cleaning, cooking. Make sure you're taking your medications properly." I didn't take any medications except a daily vitamin, and Helen knew that. "Helen, I don't need any help." She turned to me with that patient smile people use with children or mental patients. "Mom, I know this is hard to accept. No one wants to admit they're getting older and need assistance. But it's not about what you want anymore, it's about what's safe for you." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. It's not about what you want anymore. She was already positioning herself as the decision-maker in my life. "And financially," she continued, "Richard thinks it would be wise to simplify your accounts. Maybe consolidate everything so it's easier to manage. We could set up automatic payments for all your bills. Make sure nothing gets forgotten." There it was. Access to my money disguised as helping with my bills. I decided to test how far she would go. "You know, Helen, maybe you're right. I have been feeling a little overwhelmed lately with all the paperwork." Her eyes lit up with excitement she tried to hide. "Really? Oh, Mom. I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. What would I need to do?" "Well, first we'd need to add Richard and me to your bank accounts, just as authorized users to help with transactions. And we should probably look at getting power of attorney documents in place, just in case of emergencies." Power of attorney. Complete control over my finances, my property, my life. That sounds complicated. Not at all. Martin Hendricks can handle everything. He said he could have the paperwork ready by the end of the week. She had already discussed specific timelines with the lawyer. This wasn't a spontaneous idea born from concern. This was a planned takeover. "What about my house?" "Well, Mom, this house is way too big for you now. And it's worth quite a bit of money that could be used for your care. We could sell it and put you somewhere more appropriate for someone your age." "Somewhere more appropriate? A nursing home, no doubt. One that costs just enough to drain my resources while keeping me warehoused and out of the way." "I see. I know it's a lot to think about, but honestly, it's a relief to have everything planned out. Richard and I want to make sure you're taken care of properly." After she left, I sat in my living room and stared at the walls I had painted myself just 2 years ago. The house Helen wanted to sell was the first thing I had ever truly owned. George and I had saved for 15 years to buy it, and I had been making improvements and updates ever since. It was my sanctuary, my independence, my security. And Helen wanted to take it away from me as easily as she would throw away an old newspaper. I looked at the family photos again, seeing them with new eyes. Every smile Helen had given me, every hug, every "I love you, Mom." How many of them had been investments in this moment? How long had she been planning to strip me of everything I had worked for? That evening Sophie called. Helen must have told her to, because 9-year-olds don't usually make unprompted phone calls to their grandmothers. "Hi, Grandma. Mommy said I should call and check on you." "That was sweet of her, honey. Are you feeling okay? Mommy said you might be getting sick." Getting sick. Helen was even using my granddaughter to spread the story of my declining health. "I feel fine, Sophie. How was school today?" "Good. We learned about butterflies. Did you know they used to be caterpillars?" "I did know that. Pretty amazing, isn't it?" "Yeah. Mommy says people change too, and sometimes they can't help it." My heart broke a little more. Helen was preparing Sophie for my supposed mental decline, making sure even my granddaughter would believe I was becoming incompetent. After I hung up, I made a decision. Helen wanted to play games with my mind, my money, and my life. She thought I was a helpless old woman who would go quietly into whatever institution she had planned for me. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with memories I had buried for years. Memories of all the times I had sacrificed for Helen, believing I was building a loving relationship with my daughter. Now those same memories felt like evidence of my own foolishness. I remembered when Helen was 17 and wanted to go on a senior trip to Europe with her classmates. The cost was $3,000, money we didn't have. George had just been laid off from the factory, and we were struggling to keep up with the mortgage payments. "All my friends are going, Mom," Helen had cried, tears streaming down her face. "I'll be the only one left behind. It's not fair." I had worked extra shifts at the diner for 6 months, coming home with swollen feet and aching shoulders, saving every tip to make that trip possible. I remembered the joy on Helen's face when I surprised her with the money. She had hugged me so tight, promising she would never forget what I had done for her. Apparently she had forgotten. Then there was the college fund. George and I had started saving for Helen's education when she was born, putting away every spare dollar we could find. When she graduated high school, we had enough to cover 2 years at the state university. But Helen had her heart set on a private liberal arts college that cost 3 times as much. "Please, Mom," she had begged. "This is my future we're talking about. You wouldn't want me to settle for second best, would you?" So I sold the house George and I had bought as newlyweds. The little blue house with the white picket fence where we had planned to grow old together. The house where Helen had taken her first steps, where we had celebrated every birthday and Christmas. I sold it and moved us into a tiny apartment so Helen could have her dream education. She graduated with honors and immediately got a good job. I was so proud, telling everyone who would listen about my successful daughter. She promised to help us buy another house once she got established. That promise lasted exactly 3 months. Helen met Richard at her new job, and suddenly her priorities shifted. She needed money for a new wardrobe to impress him. Then she needed help with the deposit on a nicer apartment. When they got engaged, she needed help with wedding expenses because Richard's family was well off, and she wanted to match their standard. "Just this one time, Mom," became her constant refrain. "I'll pay you back when things settle down." George died 2 years after Helen's wedding. Heart attack at 58, probably brought on by the stress of working 2 jobs to rebuild our savings. Helen cried beautifully at his funeral, giving a touching eulogy about what a wonderful father he had been. But when it came time to help with funeral expenses, she claimed Richard was having problems at work and money was tight. I paid for my husband's funeral alone. After George died, Helen became even more demanding. She and Richard were trying to start a family, and they needed a bigger house. Could I help with the down payment? Just a loan, of course. They were also trying to build up Richard's business, and every investment required cash they didn't have. I kept giving, kept believing that this was what families did for each other. When Sophie was born, I was so grateful to be included in her life that I paid for the nursery furniture, the stroller, the car seat, all the expensive baby equipment Helen claimed they couldn't afford. But looking back now, I realized Helen had always been able to afford what she wanted. The designer clothes, the expensive dinners out, the annual vacations. It was only when it came to things for me, or things she thought I should pay for, that money became an issue. The pattern became clear once I allowed myself to see it. Helen would call when she needed something, always with a crisis that required immediate financial help. A medical emergency, a car repair, unexpected tax bills. And I would rush to help, depleting my own savings to solve her problems. Between phone calls, weeks would pass without contact. She was always too busy to visit, too stressed to chat. But the moment she needed money, I was her devoted mother again. I got up and walked to my desk, pulling out the folder where I kept records of every loan I had given Helen over the years. George had taught me to keep detailed financial records, and old habits die hard. The numbers were staggering. Over the past 15 years, I had given Helen $47,000. Money for emergencies that turned out to be luxuries. Money for investments that never materialized. Money for Sophie's future that somehow never made it into Sophie's college fund. None of it had ever been repaid, despite Helen's repeated promises. I thought about the conversation we'd had just 6 months ago, when Helen called crying about Richard's mother criticizing their lifestyle. She thinks we're not good enough for her son, Helen had sobbed. She keeps talking about how much more successful Richard's brother is, how he can afford to send his kids to private school. I feel so embarrassed, Mom. 2 days later, she asked for $8,000 to enroll Sophie in an exclusive private academy. It's not about keeping up with anyone, she had insisted. It's about giving Sophie the best opportunities. You understand that, don't you, Mom? You always wanted the best for me. And like a fool, I had liquidated part of my retirement account to pay for it. Now I wondered if Richard's mother had ever criticized them at all, or if that had just been another manipulation to make me feel sorry for Helen and open my wallet. The worst part was realizing how Helen had trained me to feel guilty for having money while she struggled. Every conversation included subtle reminders of how hard things were for her, how much stress Richard was under, how worried she was about providing for Sophie. Meanwhile, my own needs became smaller and smaller. I stopped buying new clothes, telling myself the old ones were fine. I canceled the cable TV to save money, even though the evenings became terribly lonely. I ate simpler meals, shopped only sales, and drove my car until it was barely functional, because every dollar I didn't spend was a dollar I could give to Helen when she needed it. And she always needed it. I had become so focused on being a good mother, on proving my love through financial support, that I had forgotten to protect myself. I had forgotten that love should flow both ways, that family relationships should be built on more than financial transactions. Standing there in my nightgown at 3 in the morning, surrounded by evidence of my own generosity and Helen's endless taking, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and deep, but underneath it something harder was forming. Anger. Pure, clean anger at being used so thoroughly and for so long. Anger at myself for enabling it, and anger at Helen for exploiting my love so ruthlessly. I thought about Sophie, innocent little Sophie who had unknowingly revealed her parents' plan. Was this the legacy I wanted to leave her? A grandmother who was discarded once her usefulness ended? A family where love was measured in dollars and manipulation was rewarded? Helen had always been clever at getting what she wanted, but she had made one crucial error in her calculations. She had assumed that I would continue to be the same pushover I had always been. She thought I would go quietly, that I would hand over my life savings without a fight because that's what I had always done. But stealing my money wasn't the same as asking for a loan. Taking control of my life wasn't the same as accepting my help. Helen was about to cross a line she had never crossed before, and she had no idea that this time would be different. This time I was ready for her. I put the financial records back in the folder and returned to bed. But instead of tossing and turning, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Helen wanted to play games with my mind and my money. She wanted to paint me as a confused old woman who needed to be managed like a child. Fine. If she wanted to see a confused old woman, that's exactly what I would give her. At least at first. But she would learn too late that there's a difference between being old and being foolish. And I was only one of those things. Helen moved fast. Faster than I had expected, but not faster than I was prepared for. 3 days after our conversation about simplifying my finances, she showed up with Richard and a briefcase full of documents. They both wore their most caring expressions, like concerned family members arriving for an intervention. "Mom, we brought the paperwork Martin prepared," Helen announced, settling herself at my kitchen table as if she owned the place. "He made everything very simple to understand." Richard sat across from me, his insurance salesman smile firmly in place. "Mrs. Patterson, I want you to know how much Helen and I appreciate you trusting us with this responsibility. We won't let you down." I had spent the last 3 days practicing my performance, and now it was time for the show to begin. "Oh, that's nice, dear," I said, letting my voice sound slightly vague. "What responsibility was that again?" Helen exchanged a quick glance with Richard. "We talked about this, Mom. Remember? We're going to help you with your finances, so you don't have to worry about all those complicated details anymore." Of course. I nodded, then frowned slightly. "But I thought that was next week?" "No, Mom. We scheduled it for today. You wrote it down on your calendar." I hadn't written anything on my calendar, but I shuffled over to look at it anyway, moving slower than necessary and squinting at the pages as if I couldn't quite focus. "Oh yes, here it is." I said, pointing to a completely blank square. Tuesday. Help with papers. Helen's excitement was barely contained. That's right, Mom. Now these documents are just going to make everything easier for you. No more worrying about bills or investments or any of that stressful stuff. Richard spread the papers across my table like he was dealing cards. This first document adds Helen and me as authorized signers on all your accounts. That way, if you forget to pay a bill or need help with banking, we can take care of it for you. And this one, Helen pointed to another document, gives us power of attorney. It's just a precaution, Mom, in case you ever get sick or confused and can't make decisions for yourself. I picked up the power of attorney document and stared at it, letting my hand shake slightly. This looks very official. It is, Richard said. But don't worry about understanding all the legal language. The important thing is that it protects you. Protects me. The lie came so smoothly from his mouth that I almost believed he believed it himself. Now, Mom, there's one more thing we need to discuss, Helen said, her voice taking on that gentle tone people use with mental patients. Richard and I think it would be best if you came to stay with us for a while. Stay with you. Just temporarily, she rushed to explain, until we can arrange for some in-home help. This house is really too big for you to manage alone, and we worry about you falling or having an emergency with no one around to help. I looked around my perfectly maintained kitchen, at the house I cleaned and organized myself every week. But I like my house. Of course you do, sweetie, and you'll visit it whenever you want. But staying with us would be so much safer. Sophie would love having you there. And I could make sure you're eating properly and taking your medications. What medications? Another quick glance between them. Well, Dr. Morrison thinks it would be good for you to start taking something for memory support. Just a low dose to help keep your mind sharp. Dr. Morrison had never suggested any such thing. In fact, at my last checkup 6 months ago, he had complimented me on my excellent health and clear thinking. But Helen was building her case methodically, creating a paper trail of my supposed decline. I don't want to be any trouble, I said, allowing my voice to wobble slightly. Oh, Mom, you could never be trouble. Helen reached over and patted my hand. We're family. This is what family does for each other. The irony was breathtaking. After years of taking my money and giving nothing back, she was now framing her theft as family obligation. But what about all my things? We'll pack up anything important, Richard assured me. And the rest? Well, you won't really need most of it anymore. Decluttering can be very liberating for seniors. Decluttering. They were planning to strip my house of everything valuable before selling it, and they wanted me to feel good about it. I picked up a pen and pretended to study the documents again. This all seems very complicated. It's not, Mom. Really. Just sign here and here and here. Helen pointed to the signature lines. We'll handle everything else. I started to sign the first document, then stopped. Wait. What was this one for again? Helen's patience was wearing thin, but she kept her voice sweet. That's the bank authorization, Mom. So we can help with your accounts. Oh yes. I signed with a shaky hand, making my signature look much weaker than usual. The second document was the power of attorney. As I held the pen over the signature line, I felt a moment of vertigo. If I signed this, Helen and Richard would have complete legal control over my life. They could sell my house, move my money, commit me to a nursing home, and I would have no recourse. The smart thing would be to refuse to tell them I had changed my mind. But I had a plan, and this was a crucial part of it. I signed. Helen practically glowed with triumph. Perfect, Mom. You've made such a good decision. Richard will take these to Martin's office this afternoon to get them filed. And tomorrow, Richard added, we'll start moving you over to our house. I've already arranged for a moving company to pack up your essentials. Tomorrow. I let myself sound overwhelmed. That seems very fast. Well, there's no point in delaying, Helen said briskly. The sooner we get you settled, the sooner you can start relaxing and enjoying yourself. After they left with their signed documents, I sat in my kitchen and allowed myself a small smile. Phase 1 was complete. Helen and Richard thought they had won. They thought they had successfully manipulated a confused old woman into signing away her life. They had no idea that those documents they were so excited about were completely worthless. 3 months ago, after Helen's first mention of helping with my finances, I had quietly consulted with my own lawyer. Not Martin Hendricks, but Patricia Walsh, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in elder law. Together, we had prepared for exactly this scenario. The real power of attorney documents were safely locked in Patricia's office, giving control of my affairs to her law firm in case of actual incapacity. My will had been updated and sealed. My assets had been restructured in ways that would make Helen's head spin when she discovered them. But the documents I had just signed were beautifully crafted fakes. They looked official, contained all the right legal language, and would pass casual inspection. Martin Hendricks would file them with the court, and they would sit in the system for weeks before anyone realized they were fraudulent. By then it would be too late. That evening, Sophie called to say goodnight. "Grandma, Mommy says you're coming to stay with us tomorrow." "I'm so excited." "I'm excited too, sweetheart. Mommy and Daddy are getting your room ready." Daddy moved all the boxes out of there, and Mommy bought new sheets with flowers on them. Boxes. They were already converting what must have been their storage room into my quarters. I wondered how long they planned to keep me there before moving me to the final destination Helen had chosen. "That sounds lovely, Sophie. Are you bringing your photo albums? I like looking at the pictures of Mommy when she was little." "I'll bring whatever I can fit, honey." After I hung up, I walked through my house one more time, saying goodbye to the life I had built here. Tomorrow, I would play the role of the confused, grateful mother, allowing Helen and Richard to believe they were in control. But while they celebrated their victory, I would be gathering evidence, recording conversations, documenting their lies. Because in 3 months, when they tried to access the money they thought they had stolen, they would discover something that would shatter their world. And I would be there to watch it happen. Helen had always been good at getting what she wanted through manipulation and lies. But she had never faced an opponent who was willing to play her own game back at her. She was about to learn that the biggest mistake you can make is underestimating someone you think you've already defeated. Living in Helen's house was like being a prisoner with a smile painted on the cell door. For 2 months, I played my role perfectly, the grateful, slightly confused mother who was so lucky to have such caring children to look after her. During the day, I shuffled around in my slippers, asked the same questions twice, and let Helen guide me through simple tasks as if I couldn't manage them alone. I watched her go through my mail, handle my phone calls, and make decisions about my life with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the power. What Helen didn't know was that every conversation was being recorded by the small device Patricia Walsh had given me. Every lie, every manipulation, every cruel comment she made when she thought I couldn't hear properly was being documented. The device looked like a simple hearing aid, and Helen was so convinced of my declining mental state that she never questioned why I suddenly needed one. She probably thought it was another sign of my deterioration. "Mom's hearing is getting so bad," I heard her tell Richard one evening when they thought I was napping. "Yesterday I had to repeat everything 3 times. It's so sad watching her fall apart like this." The recording device caught every word. Living with them also gave me a front row seat to their true relationship, and what I saw disgusted me. Helen spoke to Richard like he was an employee rather than a husband, ordering him around and criticizing everything he did. Richard, for his part, seemed to resent her constant demands but lacked the backbone to stand up to her. "Did you call the realtor about Mom's house?" she would snap over breakfast. "I left a message." "She hasn't called back yet." "Well, call again. We need to get that property listed before the market changes. And make sure you tell her to price it high. We can always come down later." My house. They were already planning to sell my house, the one place in the world that was truly mine. But the worst part was watching how they treated Sophie. My sweet granddaughter was nothing more than a tool to them, useful for maintaining appearances but otherwise ignored unless she could serve their purposes. "Sophie, go sit with Grandma and keep her company," Helen would say whenever she wanted me out of the way. "She gets lonely when she's by herself too long." Sophie would dutifully come and sit with me, chattering about school or her friends while Helen and Richard discussed their plans in the kitchen. They spoke freely, assuming I couldn't hear or wouldn't understand what they were saying. That's how I learned about the nursing home. "I found a place called Sunset Manor," Richard said one evening while I was supposedly watching television with Sophie. "It's about 30 minutes outside the city. The monthly cost is reasonable, and they have good reviews for memory care." How reasonable. Helen's voice was sharp with interest. $3,200 a month. That includes everything: room, board, medical supervision, activities. Perfect. At that rate, Mom's money should last about 15 years, maybe 20 if we invest wisely. By then, Sophie will be in college and we'll have built up our own nest egg. 15 to 20 years. They had calculated exactly how long they could warehouse me while spending my money. What about visits? Richard asked. Helen laughed, and the sound was colder than winter rain. Oh, we'll visit. Often enough to keep up appearances. But honestly, once she's settled there and her condition gets worse, she probably won't even remember who we are. It'll be easier for everyone. Sophie looked up from her coloring book. Is Grandma sick? Just tired, sweetie, Helen said smoothly. Grandma's mind is getting old and tired, so we're going to find her a nice place where people can take better care of her than we can here. I sat there in my chair, staring at the television, my hands folded calmly in my lap while my heart burned with rage. They were discussing my imprisonment as casually as they might plan a vacation. But I had news for them. 2 weeks later, Helen made her first attempt to access my bank accounts. I was in the kitchen when she got the phone call from the bank. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but it was enough. What do you mean there's a problem with the authorization? We filed all the paperwork weeks ago. No, I'm her daughter and I have power of attorney. Well, then check again. She hung up and immediately called Richard. Something's wrong at the bank. They're saying they can't find our authorization documents. That afternoon, they drove to the bank together, leaving me with Sophie. They were gone for over 2 hours, and when they returned, Helen's face was flushed with anger and frustration. Bureaucratic idiots, she muttered to Richard. They claim the documents we filed were somehow invalid. Martin swears he submitted everything correctly. What does that mean for us? It means we have to refile everything. Martin is working on it. But Martin couldn't fix what was never broken. The documents were fake, designed to look real long enough to let Helen think she had one, but never meant to actually function. A week later, Helen tried to refinance my house. Same result. This is ridiculous, she exploded after another failed phone call. How can there be problems with every single document? I shuffled into the kitchen, moving slowly and looking confused. Is everything all right, dear? Helen forced a smile. Just some paperwork issues, Mom. Nothing for you to worry about. Oh, good. I don't understand all that complicated stuff anyway. But I understood perfectly. Phase 2 of my plan was working exactly as Patricia and I had designed it. Helen was being frustrated at every turn, but she couldn't figure out why. The documents looked legitimate, the process seemed straightforward, but nothing was working. Meanwhile, I was gathering evidence. Every conversation, every plan, every cruel comment was being recorded and documented. Patricia was building a case that would not only protect me, but potentially land Helen and Richard in serious legal trouble. The breaking point came 3 months after I moved in with them. Helen had been trying all morning to reach Martin Hendricks about the ongoing document problems. When she finally got through to him, I was sitting in the living room, apparently dozing in my chair. What do you mean they're fraudulent? Helen's voice rose to a near shriek. How can they be fraudulent? You prepared them yourself. I opened one eye slightly, watching her pace back and forth in the kitchen. That's impossible. No, I'm telling you, we filed exactly what you gave us. Well, then someone made a mistake. She hung up and immediately called Richard at work. Martin says the bank is claiming our power of attorney documents are fake. Complete fabrications. They're threatening to report us for attempted fraud. The word fraud seemed to echo through the house. I closed my eye and continued my performance of peaceful sleep. How is that possible? Richard's voice was barely audible through the phone. I don't know. But Martin is scared. He says if this goes any further, he could lose his license. He wants to distance himself from the whole thing. Helen was finally beginning to understand that something was very, very wrong. But she still had no idea what had really happened. That evening, she confronted me directly for the first time. Mom, I need to ask you something important, she said, sitting across from me at the dinner table while Richard and Sophie ate in uncomfortable silence. Of course, dear. Did you sign any other legal documents recently? Before we helped you with yours. I looked at her with the innocent confusion I had perfected over the past 3 months. Other documents? I don't think so. You know how muddled I get about those things. Think, Mom. This is important. Did anyone else help you with legal paperwork? I don't remember, Helen. You know my memory isn't what it used to be. The frustration in her eyes was beautiful. She was beginning to suspect that she had been outmaneuvered, but she couldn't figure out how. Mom, if you sign something else, something that conflicts with what we filed, it could cause big problems for all of us. What kind of problems? Legal problems. The kind that could get people in trouble. I blinked at her with the wide-eyed innocence of someone who couldn't possibly understand complex legal issues. Oh my, that sounds serious. Maybe you should call a lawyer. Helen's jaw tightened. We did call a lawyer, Mom. That's how we know there's a problem. Well then, I'm sure it will all work out. These things usually do. But it wouldn't work out. Not for Helen and Richard. Because tomorrow morning, Patricia Walsh would be filing a complaint with the district attorney's office. Elder abuse, attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit theft. The charges would be serious enough to destroy their lives the way they had planned to destroy mine. And I would finally be free to go home. The phone call came at 7:30 in the morning, 3 months and 2 weeks after I had moved into Helen and Richard's house. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the phone rang, and Helen answered with the cheerful voice she used when she didn't recognize the caller. Helen Patterson speaking. Yes, this is she. What? That's impossible. No, you must have the wrong information. Her voice changed from cheerful to confused to panicked in the span of 30 seconds. I continued making my coffee, moving slowly and deliberately, as if I couldn't hear the conversation that was about to change everything. Richard. Helen screamed toward the stairs. Richard, get down here now. Richard appeared in his bathrobe, hair disheveled, looking like a man who knew bad news was coming. That was the district attorney's office, Helen said, her voice shaking. They want us to come in for questioning. Today. About elder abuse charges. Elder abuse. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. That's crazy, Richard said, but his voice lacked conviction. We've been taking care of your mother. How is that abuse? I don't know. Helen's panic was complete now. They mentioned fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft. Richard, what if they arrest us? I turned around slowly, holding my coffee cup with both hands to hide any trembling that might give away my satisfaction. What's wrong, dear? I asked, my voice soft and concerned. You both look upset. Helen stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was finally beginning to suspect that her confused, helpless mother might not be as helpless as she appeared. Mom, she said carefully, is there something you need to tell us? About what, sweetheart? About the legal documents. About other lawyers. About anything you might have done that we don't know about. I looked at her with the same innocent expression I had worn for months. I'm afraid I don't understand what you're asking. But Helen wasn't buying it anymore. Mom, if you did something, if you planned this somehow, you need to tell us now. Before this goes any further. Richard was staring at me too, and I could see the moment when he realized they had been played. She's not confused, he said quietly. She's been playing us this whole time. That's ridiculous, Helen snapped, but her voice wavered. Look at her. She can barely remember what day it is. I set down my coffee cup and straightened my shoulders. When I spoke, my voice was clear, strong, and completely lucid. Today is Friday, November 15th. Yesterday you called Sunset Manor to arrange a tour for next week. Last Tuesday you tried to access my investment account, and were told the authorization was invalid. 3 weeks ago you told Richard that my money should last 15 to 20 years if you invested it wisely. The silence that followed was deafening. Helen's face went through a remarkable series of changes. Confusion, realization, and finally pure rage. You've been faking it, she whispered. All this time, you've been faking being confused. I've been protecting myself, I replied calmly. Something I should have started doing years ago. Richard sank into a chair, his head in his hands. We're screwed. We're completely screwed. Mom, you can't do this to us, Helen said, her voice taking on the pleading tone she had used so effectively when she was younger. We're your family. We were trying to help you. Help me. I laughed. and it felt good to let the sound be bitter and sharp instead of confused and wavering. You were planning to steal every penny I have and warehouse me in a nursing home until I died. You calculated exactly how long my money would last while you spent it. Helen's pleading shifted to anger. You owe us. Do you have any idea how much we've sacrificed to take care of you these past few months? Sacrificed. The word came out like a slap. Helen, for the past 42 years, I have given you everything you ever asked for. I sold my dream house to pay for your college. I worked myself into exhaustion to fund your wedding. I gave you $47,000 over the years. Money I never saw again despite your promises to pay it back. Helen flinched at the number. She had probably hoped I hadn't been keeping track. And this is how you repay me, I continued. By trying to steal what little I have left and abandon me in an institution. We weren't abandoning you, Richard said weakly. We were going to visit. Once a month, if that. I heard you planning it all. I heard you say that once my condition got worse, I probably wouldn't remember who you were anyway. Sophie appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. She looked confused and frightened, and my heart broke for her. None of this was her fault. What's happening? She asked in a small voice. Helen and Richard looked at their daughter, probably realizing for the first time that their actions would affect her too. Nothing, sweetie, Helen said automatically. Just grown-up problems. But Sophie was looking at me, and I could see the intelligence in her eyes. She had always been brighter than her parents gave her credit for. Grandma, are you really sick? She asked directly. I knelt down to her level, ignoring the ache in my knees. No, sweetheart. I'm not sick. Sometimes adults have to pretend things to protect themselves from other adults who want to hurt them. Like in my books, when the princess has to trick the evil queen? Exactly like that. Helen made a sound of disgust. Don't fill her head with that nonsense. We weren't trying to hurt you. Weren't you? I stood up and faced my daughter. You forged legal documents to steal my money. You planned to sell my house without my permission. You were going to commit me to a nursing home against my will. What would you call that? We call it taking care of a mother who was losing her mind. But I wasn't losing my mind, Helen. I was just tired of being your personal bank account. The doorbell rang, interrupting our confrontation. Through the window, I could see two people in business suits standing on the porch. That would be the investigators, I said calmly. Right on time. Helen went pale. Mom, please. Think about what this will do to Sophie. Think about our family. I did think about our family. For 42 years I put our family first. I put you first. And you repaid me by planning to steal everything I worked for and lock me away like an inconvenience. Richard was at the window, watching the investigators wait patiently on the porch. They're not going away, he said. No, they're not. I picked up my purse and headed toward the door. Because I'm the one who called them. Mom, wait. Helen grabbed my arm. We can work this out. We don't need lawyers and investigators. We're family. I looked at her hand on my arm, then met her eyes. Helen, you stopped being my family the moment you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive. I opened the door and greeted the investigators with a smile. Good morning. I'm Marilyn Patterson. I believe you wanted to speak with me about my daughter and son-in-law. The next few hours passed in a blur of questions, statements, and recorded evidence. Patricia Walsh arrived with a briefcase full of documentation. The fake papers Helen and Richard had filed, recordings of their conversations, evidence of their plans to commit me and steal my assets. Helen and Richard were not arrested that day, but they were informed that charges would likely be filed within the week. The investigation would continue, and they were advised to retain legal counsel immediately. By afternoon, I was back in my own house for the first time in over 3 months. Patricia had arranged for Sophie to stay with Richard's parents temporarily, while the legal situation was resolved. The house felt smaller than I remembered, but infinitely more peaceful. I walked through each room, touching familiar objects and breathing in the scent of home. That evening, Sophie called. Grandma, are you really okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than fine. Mommy's been crying a lot. She says you're being mean to her. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar stab of guilt that Helen had trained me to feel. But this time I pushed it away. Sophie, sometimes when people do bad things there are consequences. Your mommy and daddy tried to take something that didn't belong to them, and now they have to face the results of that choice. Are you still my grandma? I will always be your grandma. No matter what happens with your parents, you and I will always be family. Can I still visit you? As often as your grandparents will bring you. After I hung up, I sat in my living room and looked at the family photos that still covered every surface. But now I saw them differently. Instead of memories of love and sacrifice, I saw evidence of a pattern that had taken me too long to recognize. 3 weeks later, Helen and Richard were formally charged with elder abuse, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. They eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for avoiding jail time. But they were sentenced to 5 years of probation and ordered to pay restitution. More importantly, they were prohibited from having any contact with me without court supervision. 6 months after that nightmare ended, I had a new will drawn up. The bulk of my estate would go into a trust for Sophie's education and future, managed by Patricia's law firm until Sophie turned 25. Helen would receive exactly $1. I also established a fund to help other elderly people who had been financially abused by family members. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure other people didn't have to endure what I had endured. On Sophie's 10th birthday, she came to visit me with Richard's parents. She had grown taller and more serious, but she still had that spark of intelligence that reminded me why I had fought so hard to protect myself and ultimately her future. "Grandma, I'm glad you tricked Mommy and Daddy," she said as we sat in my garden, sharing a piece of birthday cake. "Oh? Why is that?" "Because now I know that when people try to be mean to me, I can be smart and protect myself too." I hugged her close, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling a peace I hadn't known in years. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is teaching them that they don't have to be a victim, that they can fight back, that they can win. Helen had taught me that lesson, though not in the way she intended. And now I had passed it on to Sophie. The cycle was finally broken.